Manhood hour! What is a man? What is a man?
It's an adult human male.
Manhood. What is a man? What is a man?
It's an adult human male.
Manhood.
Part of the reason why Jamestown was such a mess was that their leaders were idiots. The Virginia Company had already chosen the settlers who should lead the colony once in America. They didn't really choose the best and brightest, just the ones with the most prestige back in England. Jamestown paid the price for this poor leadership. More Native American attacks followed. They were smaller than that first attack, most likely probing missions for natives to assess the settlement's strength. They also cut off Jamestown from food. With no farms to feed them, the English were down to the rations they had brought from England, and their water sucked. Jamestown was at the mouth of the James River, which became swampy and brackish in the summer months. With rotting food and dirty water, not to mention Native American attacks, death hung in the air. The only solution Jamestown's leaders had was getting the first boat back to England. Those who couldn't get on the boats would just have to wait for the slow, cold hand of death. But one settler refused to wait for anything. His name was John Smith. He wasn't as rich or important as Jamestown's leaders, but he was smarter, and he wasn't shy about letting them know it. Why the hell are we looking for gold when nobody in the area seems to have any? Why aren't we growing food when we're clearly starving? Why don't we find out about these Native Americans since we know nothing about them? Smith and his crew frequently ventured out into the wilderness to find resources and learn about the natives. He discovered that the native groups closest to Jamestown really hated them, most likely because they were on land considered part of Native American hunting grounds. They were also more likely to be loyal to Chief Powhatan. The natives further away from Jamestown were much more willing to trade with the English and much less attached to Powhatan. Perhaps this information could be useful. Inevitably, he was attacked and captured on one of his expeditions. He was led to the home of a tall man surrounded by many followers. This guy had plus 100 aura XP. Smith didn't exactly know what the man was saying, but all the cues told him he was debating on whether he should kill him. This became painfully clear when they tied him to a tree. Smith had to think fast. He tried to communicate to Aura Man that he was an Aura Man too. He was too important to kill. Why, if you kill me, my King James is going to want revenge. Then he went into his pocket and showed him a compass. Aura Man looked impressed with the needle bouncing around inside the compass. Smith then regaled him with tales about what he knew about God and the night sky. It's unlikely that Aura Man knew what the hell Smith was talking about, but he decided not to kill him all the same. Maybe he sensed that Smith had aura of his own. Maybe he was afraid of the wrath of this King James guy. Or maybe there was someone with even greater aura he had to consider. Because Aura Man wasn't Chief Powhatan. He was Powhatan's brother, Pocahontas. He was probably the worst guy for Smith to meet because he hated the English more than anyone else. He probably would have killed him, but figured it was best to ask his brother what to do before he started a war that his brother may not be able to win. Pocahontas took Smith prisoner, parading him through one village after another like a trophy. In one of these villages, Smith was taken into a large hut filled with smoke. He was laid on the ground at the feet of an older man sitting on a pile of mats. Women came by to wash Smith off and feed him a nice meal. Smith knew this was not a good sign. An even worse sign was that the old man was surrounded by a bunch of younger men, all of whom were carrying clubs with blades protruding from them. Boy, it sure would suck to get hit by those. In fact, Smith realized that is exactly what the old man was discussing with them. The club guys treated the old man with immense respect. This must have been Chief Powhatan. Powhatan then asked Smith what the English were doing in his territory. Smith lied, telling him they had a battle with the Spanish on the high seas and were forced to come to Jamestown to escape. He was just waiting for King James to show up because, boy, he was gonna get revenge on those Spanish. It was kind of a brilliant play by Smith. He didn't threaten Powhatan directly, he just let him know that King James was kind of an aura man in his own right, and maybe Powhatan didn't want to do anything to make him angry. Powhatan told Smith to lay down on the ground with his head next to a wooden block. Whoa, it would be really bad if those club guys beat me in the head when it's laying on this wooden block. Smith lay there thinking about just how badly the next few minutes were going to suck. Then, all of a sudden, a young girl came out, threw her arms around Smith, and put her body in between him and the club guys. She begged Powhatan not to kill him. She couldn't have been more than 11 years old, but she seemed brave and unafraid to ask Powhatan for this favor. Her name was Pocahontas, and she was Powhatan's daughter, perhaps his favorite daughter. This has become one of the most iconic moments in the early history of what would become the United States, and it's still shrouded in mystery. Did Pocahontas really think John Smith was so cool that she had to save him? Not likely. She was an 11-year-old princess, and he was an old soldier who wore metal and hadn't bathed in months. Or did Pocahontas see the English as potential allies that could perhaps help her become the ruler one day? That's more likely, but the explanation that probably makes the most sense is that this was an elaborate ceremony. Powhatan, Pocahontas, the club guys, they were all working from a script to scare John Smith and then save him at the last minute. That way he would feel indebted to Chief Powhatan and the daughter who saved his life. Remember when I didn't kill you? You owe me several favors, John Smith. This makes the most sense considering what happened next. Powhatan told Smith that they were now friends. He would provide all the food Jamestown would need, and in return, he wanted some of those sweet metal tools they carried around, especially those shooty sticks that made all the noise. Smith agreed to these terms because what other choice did he have? He came back to Jamestown with a bunch of food, and all the homies dapped him up for being a W man. Then some of Powhatan's people showed up and said, we're here to get some guns. Smith responded, oh sure, you see that cannon over there? You could take that. The Native Americans couldn't even move the cannon an inch. Smith shrugged and said, I don't know what to tell you, boss. I tried. The fact of the matter is, Smith had no intention of trading any weapons with Powhatan. At the end of the day, he knew that Powhatan was a chief and only wanted guns to fight other Native Americans so he could expand his empire. He may have also wanted guns to help defend himself against the English. In fact, Powhatan saw Jamestown as part of his empire. The guns he demanded of them was a tax of sorts, a tax Smith was not going to pay. In the meantime, one loser after another who led Jamestown either died of stupidity or slinked back to Europe in disgrace. Towards the end of 1608, all of them were gone. The colonists finally elected John Smith as leader. How could they not? Not only was he the only one bringing in food, but he had diplomatic ties with the Native Americans. He was their only lifeline. This was a chance for him to make some major changes. First, he ordered that a fort be built around the edge of Jamestown, one that would be guarded 24 hours a day. No more sneak attacks. Second, he made the famous decree, he who does not work does not eat. If you want food, you're going to have to grow it, or you're going to have to do something to contribute to the colony. He was trying to make Jamestown self-sufficient so that they wouldn't need Powhatan's food or protection. Speaking of which, Smith had to figure out just how much longer he could BS Powhatan. He was happy to give Powhatan beads and metal farm tools, but he'd be damned if he gave away any knives or guns. Powhatan began to get suspicious. He then noticed that Smith was making contact with Native American groups further and further away from Jamestown, groups that Powhatan considered ops. Why that lousy two-faced John Smith? Powhatan cut off all food to Jamestown and sent agents to sneak into the settlement to steal some guns. Smith retaliated by launching vicious attacks on Powhatan's villages to take food and show that he was not afraid of a fight. Despite these efforts, Jamestown faced starvation again. A few English settlers snuck out of the settlement to live among the Powhatan and gave them valuable information about Jamestown's weaknesses. We'll end this part of the story here with the side note that it wasn't Columbus who was the first great man in United States history. It was Powhatan. It was John Smith. It was Powhatan and John Smith. Powhatan built a sprawling American empire through diplomacy and war, an empire that would be replaced by what would eventually become the United States. It was John Smith who started that process of replacement. While Smith respected Powhatan and his people more than most Englishmen did, his respect was pragmatic. His main goal was to help England build an American empire. In order to do this, he needed to use American methods, by which we mean Native American methods, by which we mean Powhatan's methods of diplomacy and war. But the English were small-timers in America compared to Powhatan. They were outnumbered by tens of thousands. No amount of guns could even the playing field. Smith believed what they lacked in numbers they needed to make up for in shrewdness and viciousness. This viciousness is one of Smith's lasting legacies to the world that would come to replace Powhatan's. Aside from viciousness, Smith embodied many values Americans love to believe about themselves. He was pragmatic and realistic. Good old-fashioned American horse sense. He rose to prominence through skill and will, showing that he was better than the rich boys who were just handed their privilege, one of the first examples of American meritocracy. And just like America tends to be sometimes, he was full of shit. Being full of shit saved his life when he was face to face with Chief Powhatan. The version of the Pocahontas story he told was definitely full of shit, especially considering how he kept changing the details to make himself seem more heroic. He spun many myths about himself the way America does, as every country does. It would be cinematic if there was one final showdown between the two great men in American history, but history gives us few cinematic moments. It does give us plenty of comedy, though. In October 1609, Smith fell asleep in a boat after a day of swashbuckling up the James River. All of a sudden, a spark ignited the gunpowder bag he wore on his belt. His lower body caught fire, so he jumped into the river to put himself out. The damage was already done. He was burned in parts of his body no man wants to be burned in. His only chance for survival was to go back to England for treatment. He survived, but he never returned to America. It was at this point in his life that he wrote most of the myths about himself and what happened in Jamestown. He even suggested that the fire he suffered was an assassination attempt. Doesn't that sound cooler than just being a dumbass? Either way, there's a bit of humor in the alpha male John Smith ending his American career with burnt genitals.